What if I told you that Quentin Tarantino doesn't just cast actors, he claims them? In this video, we'll uncover the 6 actors he trusts above all and why they're more than stars. They're the lifeblood of his cinematic universe. By the end, you'll see why working with Tarantino is less about roles and more about becoming legend. Pause for a moment, take a deep breath, stretch your legs, and let the anticipation sink in before the story unfolds. Tarantino doesn't play it safe. He doesn't cast by formula or popularity. He casts like a gunslinger, fast, instinctive, and devastatingly precise. And once you're chosen, you don't just act in a film. You become part of the myth itself. Take Pumpkin, for instance. He offered that role to Tim Roth. For over 30 years, Quentin Tarantino has rewritten the rules of cinema. Dialogue-driven, ultra-stylized, blood-soaked, and meticulously detailed. But behind the chaos, most people miss a crucial truth. He's fiercely loyal. Once he discovers someone who understands his rhythm, his madness, his intricate storytelling, he brings them back repeatedly. Not because they're trending stars, but because they sync with his wavelength as if it were encoded in their DNA. And when that connection happens, actors aren't merely cast, they're carved into his films. From Pulp Fiction to Kill Bill, Inglourious Basterds, and Django Unchained, his movies might traverse genres, but one thing remains constant: the actors he trusts. He doesn't write roles to fill a page. He builds entire worlds around their voices. Tarantino doesn't cast to play it safe. He casts to ignite. On screen, it's mesmerizing. You're not watching a performance. You're witnessing possession. Tim Roth, for example, isn't just an actor in Reservoir Dogs. There's an unspoken connection, a loyalty forged in fire. Tarantino has worked with many, but only a select few speak his cinematic language fluently. Challenge him, inspire him, and keep pace without ever derailing the vision. Here are the 6 actors who remain closest to Tarantino's flame, the voices behind the violence, the calm in the chaos, and the reason he never looks any further. Some collaborations don't start with a handshake. They begin with a monologue. When Samuel L. Jackson read for Pulp Fiction, Tarantino didn't just find an actor. He discovered a voice he instantly recognized. Jules Winfield wasn't cast. He was claimed. Jackson later said, "I didn't audition. I claimed that role like it was written in my blood." It wasn't arrogance. It was perfect alignment. From that moment on, Tarantino didn't write characters. He wrote for Jackson. When someone delivers your words with that rhythm, authority, and fire, you stop searching for anyone else. Jackson didn't aim to please. He aimed to dominate the room. Jackson isn't merely part of Tarantino's world. He is the world. His sermons, silences, and eruptions are masterclasses in cinematic command. In Jackie Brown, menace becomes charm. In Kill Bill, his cameo reverberates rather than whispers. In Django Unchained, his role reshaped notions of loyalty, fear, and power. It's more than screen presence, it's screen gravity. Tarantino once joked, "If I gave Sam the phone book, he'd make it Shakespeare." By The Hateful Eight, there was no question. Jackson wasn't being cast. He was being returned. He is the pulse of the film. And Jackson brought something colder, sharper, something that cut through the scene with absolute control. When he delivers those monologues, eyes steady, voice low, you're not just watching an actor perform. You're witnessing authority incarnate. It's not about volume. It's not about anger. It's about timing. Every pause, every shift is calculated perfection. Tarantino knew Jackson could hold a silence longer than most actors could hold an entire scene, and he exploited that talent relentlessly. There's a reason Tarantino keeps bringing him back. It's not nostalgia, it's necessity. When people ask who Tarantino's muse is, they expect some enigmatic, poetic answer. But Tarantino has said it plainly. He's my Darrow, my Eastwood, my everything. There's no mystery. Jackson isn't a guest in Tarantino's universe. He's the cornerstone. Other directors talk about chemistry. Tarantino and Jackson built alchemy. Because some actors deliver lines, Jackson defines them. Some directors build characters. Tarantino builds myths, and he built one around her. Uma Thurman didn't just star in Kill Bill. She became the archetype, the avenger, the mother, the blade. But go back a decade before that, to Pulp Fiction. Mia Wallace danced her way into pop culture history with a single glance, a cigarette, and the smallest tilt of her head. The wig, the silence, the simmering danger. It wasn't direction. It was trust. Tarantino once said, "There's something about Uma. She gets the rhythm of my words before I even finish writing them." That trust wasn't casual, it was deliberate. It reshaped his writing, altered how he conceived violence, revenge, and female agency. When Tarantino wrote Kill Bill, he didn't just cast Uma, he called her. 6 months of training, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. The Bride wasn't built for any actress. She was built for one, and one only. Every pause, every stance, every silence between sword strikes was painstakingly crafted. It wasn't mere direction, it was collaboration forged through history and pain. Tarantino and Thurman didn't just work together. They argued, clashed, and in those sparks, created magic. It wasn't always smooth. The car crash on Kill Bill nearly destroyed them both. Thurman was injured. The press, the fans, everyone took sides. But they didn't walk away. Years later, Thurman reflected, "Quentin and I have our issues, but we also have our love. It's complicated, but it's real. And that reality is what made it last." When the cameras stopped rolling, there remained something unbroken, something unfinished. Tarantino didn't just praise her. He returned to her in interviews, retrospectives, and scripts no one else saw. He admitted, "I don't think I'll ever create a character more powerful than the Bride, and I wouldn't want to, unless it's with Uma." That isn't nostalgia. That's loyalty, the kind that cuts deeper than applause. And it wasn't just personal, it was cinematic. Everything Tarantino tried to say about pain, motherhood, justice, and rage, he said through her. Even when they didn't speak, even when things fell apart behind the scenes, he never recast, never replaced her. You don't rewrite mythology, you wait for the next chapter. When Tarantino cast DiCaprio, he wasn't simply adding a movie star, he was unleashing a weapon. DiCaprio had conquered prestige films, survival dramas, romances, political thrillers. But what he hadn't done, not until Tarantino, was bleed for a villain. In Django Unchained, he handed DiCaprio a character both magnetic and corrupt, a southern plantation owner, charming on the surface, rotten underneath. And Leo didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned in. Tarantino later admitted, "I wasn't sure he'd go there. It's a dark, ugly place, but he didn't hesitate. Not once." And the scene that proved it, that dinner table, the broken glass, the blood running down Leo's hand. It wasn't staged. He smashed his palm on camera, stayed fully in character, and completed the take without flinching. Tarantino instructed him to lay his palms flat on the table, and the cut didn't come when Leo got hurt. It came only when the scene was finished. That's how deep the trust ran. But what mattered more than the blood was what Leo brought beneath it. He didn't play Calvin Candy as a cartoonish villain. He embodied a man who genuinely believed he was good, and that belief was far more terrifying. This was exactly what Tarantino needed. Leo doesn't overact. He listens, he absorbs, and then, with precision, he strikes. That performance changed everything. It was the first time Tarantino had handed over that much narrative weight to someone new. Not a recurring actor, not a familiar face, but a stranger, and Leo made it intensely personal. So, when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood arrived, the call wasn't a question, it was a homecoming. Tarantino didn't offer Leo a role, he offered him a legacy. Rick Dalton wasn't written for anyone else. It was Leo, or nothing. And Leo showed up, wounded, vulnerable, still chasing greatness but past his prime. A once famous actor quietly slipping from relevance. Fiction, yes, but with echoes of truth. Leo knew it. The result wasn't explosive. It was sad, funny, human. Tarantino had always carved space for blood, revenge, spectacle, but with Leo, he carved space for grace. Their connection wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. He delivered two of the most fully realized, emotionally complex characters in Tarantino's career. One cruel, one broken, and both unforgettable. Tarantino reflected, when Leo works, he brings everything. Talent, history, weight. That's rare. And that kind of rare isn't simply cast. It's written into existence. When Tarantino found Christoph Waltz, it wasn't a discovery. It was a detonation. Before Inglourious Basterds, Waltz was relatively unknown outside Europe. A veteran of television, skilled and respected, yet overlooked. Then Tarantino handed him Hans Landa, charming, terrifying, articulate beyond belief, and everything changed. Tarantino didn't just give him a villain, he gave him the entire film, Landa had originally been written as almost unplayable, too smart, too talkative, too much. Tarantino was ready to abandon the script entirely until Waltz walked into the room. "If I couldn't find Landa, the movie was dead," he said. And then Christof appeared and saved it. From the opening scene, with milk, cigarettes, soft smiles, and death behind every syllable, Waltz didn't perform Landa. He savored him. He delivered monologues like a man feeding poisoned honey to an audience hypnotized enough not to notice. That was it. Bingo! Tarantino trusted him immediately. He handed Waltz pages of dialogue most actors would have trimmed down. Waltz didn't trim. He expanded. He found rhythm within rhythm, not just what the lines meant, but how they sounded in the air. For the first time, Tarantino didn't need to direct the energy. He only had to protect it. The result? An Oscar and worldwide recognition. A performance so layered it left audiences unsure whether they were charmed or haunted, and Tarantino wasn't finished. 2 years later, he wrote Dr. King Schultz in Django Unchained, a bounty hunter, a gentleman, a moral compass in a brutal world, and he wrote him for one man in mind. After Inglourious Bastards, Tarantino reflected, "I knew Christof could play anything, so I gave him the opposite." And Waltz delivered again. This time he brought warmth. Still eloquent, razor-sharp, but kind. That contrast didn't diminish his brilliance. It deepened it. Because Tarantino isn't just obsessed with voice, he's obsessed with duality. Waltz is one of the rare actors who can inhabit both ends of the spectrum without ever losing control. Charming without smiling, dangerous without raising his voice, wise without ever feeling distant. That's why Tarantino didn't just cast him, he built space for him. Page after page of dialogue, character work, and emotional nuance. Not because he had to, but because he could. He made the impossible effortless. As Tarantino admitted, "I had to bring him back." Even after 2 masterpieces together, he never overused Waltz. No cameos, no throwaway roles, because Waltz wasn't a tool. He was an instrument. And when you hear something that rare, that precise, that clear, you don't play it all the time. You wait until the script demands it, until the silence around it calls for a voice like his. Tarantino doesn't work with nostalgia. He works with memory. And Kurt Russell is a memory he never let go. From the Grindhouse era to 80s anti-heroes, Russell embodied a kind of masculinity that required no explanation. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He simply was. Tarantino grew up watching him, learning from the way he moved through silence, swagger, and chaos. So when the chance came to work together, Russell wasn't a gimmick. He was a ghost from another era returning to claim a new one. In Death Proof, Russell doesn't explode onto the screen. He creeps in. As Stuntman Mike, he's charming and pathetic, dangerous yet pitiful. Tarantino once said, "There's a sadness in Kurt's eyes that you can't direct. You either have it or you don't." That sadness made the character work. Russell brought more than violence. He brought regret. A faded legend trying to rewrite his myth, one crash at a time. The connection didn't stop there. Years later, when the Hateful Eight assembled, Tarantino needed someone to anchor a room full of killers, not with rage, but with presence. Russell didn't audition. He simply arrived. There's a gravity to the way he works. Tarantino didn't over-direct him. He just created space for Russell's quiet authority to spread. In interviews, Tarantino never hid it. Kurt brings weight, history. You feel every movie he's ever made in his silences. He isn't flashy. He isn't loud. And that's exactly why he fits. Tarantino's worlds are often chaos. Gunfire, blood, monologues, poetry. But when Russell appears, the storm pauses. He holds it long enough to reveal something human beneath the madness. That rarity brought him back again in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The role was small, a stunt coordinator, a narrator, a passing figure, but Russell made it matter. One scene, one voiceover, and the film felt grounded. Because when Tarantino uses Kurt Russell, he isn't just giving you a character. He's giving you an era. Presence like that isn't overused. It's honored, reserved for moments when the story demands silence before the storm. Some actors are guests in the Tarantino universe. Michael Madsen was there before it was even built. When Reservoir Dogs hit theaters in 1992, it didn't just announce a new voice in cinema. It revealed an entirely new kind of actor-director relationship, one built not on stardom or ego, but on trust, timing, and instinct. Tarantino cast Michael Madsen as Mr. Blonde, a role so brutal, so electric, that most actors would have leaned into shock and spectacle. But Madsen didn't flinch. He underplayed it. Slower, quieter, more dangerous. Most guys would have screamed, Tarantino said. Mike whispered. That's why it worked. The infamous ear-cutting scene became legendary, not just for the violence, but for the calm, the rhythm, the way Madsen made you want to look away even when nothing had happened yet. That stillness carried more weight than any scream. Watching that, Tarantino knew this was no one-time collaboration. He called Madsen family. From Kill Bill to The Hateful Eight, Madsen became part of the director's emotional architecture. He rarely played the lead, but he owned presence. You'd feel him in a room before he spoke a word. That's exactly what Tarantino loves. Stillness. Danger wrapped in quiet. Madsen never demanded more screen time. He didn't need to. He earned permanence. Between films, he and Tarantino would exchange notes, discuss timing, the pauses, the small beats that make a scene live. Tarantino would write with Madsen's rhythm in mind, not just his look, not just his voice, but the way he lets a moment breathe. There's a scene in The Hateful Eight where Madsen delivers a single line, and it shifts the tone of the entire film. Tarantino didn't oversell it. He trusted the gravity. Mike makes silence feel like dialogue. Tarantino once explained, theirs isn't a flashy partnership. It's not soaked in press, but it's real, durable, rooted in the work. He gave Madsen recurring roles, not out of mere loyalty, but because no one else could inhabit those quiet, smoldering spaces, the parts that don't scream for attention, but hold all the pressure. When Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came along, Tarantino cast Madsen again in a small role. It wasn't about legacy, it was about continuity, about knowing who still fits no matter how much time has passed. Some guys are always right for the frame, Tarantino said. Mike is one of those guys. No awards, no headlines, just consistency. And in Tarantino's world, that's the highest praise. Some actors age out, others fade. But Michael Madsen, he's still in the room, still watching, still dangerous. Tarantino never had to say it out loud. He just kept writing him back in. Quentin Tarantino doesn't just choose actors. He absorbs them into his storytelling. Once he finds someone who fits, someone who understands the rhythm, the silence, the madness, he keeps returning to them until their performance becomes part of the language itself. The actors on this list didn't audition for his world. They earned it by becoming something more than performers. They became his voice. So what do you think? Which actor do you feel defines Tarantino's universe the most? Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and if you want more stories like this, raw, uncut, and behind the scenes, make sure you're following the channel.